What's up, Taiwan? I'm Joyce coming to you from Taipei with the latest news. President Ching has returned from a diplomatic visit to Taiwan's allies in the Pacific. Upon arrival at Taoyuan Airport, he spoke about his trip and Taiwan's role in the world.
我们只要坚定地捍卫民主、深化民主，以民主的普世价值，在世界上跟各个国家交往，我们一定可以得到更多的支持。不仅仅可以守护台湾，我们也可以维护区域的和平稳定。
Lai's trip to the Pacific included stopovers in Hawaii and the U.S. territory of Guam. The trip angered China, which claims Taiwan as its own. Beijing is expected to launch another round of military exercises around Taiwan in response. For more on why Beijing might be stepping up threats toward Taiwan, Jaime Ocon spoke to Lauren Dickey, a security analyst with the China Power Project in Washington, D.C.
Lauren, I want to ask you about China using these overseas trips by Ching and the statements that President Ching makes as an excuse to conduct military exercises. Is this a new normal?
So I think anytime that President Lai goes overseas or makes statements that somehow suggest that Taiwan is a sovereign or independent entity and that the option of unification is not on the table, China has to react to that. For them, Taiwan and that goal of reunification is such a political crown jewel that they can't let this go by without doing something. And so the Joint Sword exercise series, because we don't know how many letters are in the alphabet for them to execute, right? Like they could use a joint sword in response to any type of engagement or speech or travel as they deem appropriate. So my hope is that because, I think from the road, President Lai has shown a pretty pragmatic and even-handed approach from what I've seen. So hopefully any military response by China would also take into account the fact that, there haven't been any splashy statements about Taiwan's identity that he's made. And hopefully China will be savvy enough to calibrate in that context.
With China having conducted Joint Sword A, Joint Sword B, and now potentially a Joint Sword C, is there a concern that maybe the United States and Taiwan could maybe be complacent that these drills are becoming kind of an ordinary kind of occurrence?
I do worry about that. I think that, if you look at the history of air and maritime entry events into Taiwan's ADIZ as sort of our historical marker, when those started at a larger scale and frequency than what we had seen, it was a big shock, I think, to the United States. And the United States responded, right? There were statements, there were cautionary words put out into the public. But with time, my view is that some of that tapered off. And the U.S. in some ways effectively helped normalize those actions China was taking toward Taiwan. And so now I think with the Joint Sword exercises continuing, indefinitely, we're confronted with the same challenge, right? Do we want to push back every time they happen? And if so, how hard should the United States push back? Or do we, run the risk of normalizing them by not doing anything? And I think that would be particularly dangerous. So it will be important and interesting to watch, in the coming days, how the U.S. and potentially allies and partners around the world also respond.
That was Lauren Dickey from the China Power Project. In anticipation of China's drills, Taiwan's President Ching has said the exercises would not help Beijing's international image. Lai made the comments in Palau before returning to Taiwan from his trip through the Pacific.
再多的军演、军舰、飞机给予周边国家的胁迫，都无法赢得任何一个国家的尊敬。当前的世界有许多值得大家一起努力的地方，也有很多期待我们共同解决的问题。
Taiwan's military says it spotted about a dozen Chinese Navy and Coast Guard ships around the country on Saturday, but no exercises have been announced. Taiwan's foreign ministry has criticized Malaysia for covering up an image of the country's national flag at the Kuala Lumpur airport. Photos show the taped-over flag on a sign displaying countries that are eligible for automated immigration. Though Taiwanese visitors can still enjoy that clearance, Taiwan says removing the flag has seriously damaged relations between the two sides. The Foreign Ministry says it will work with Malaysia on resolving the issue. In Syria, President Bashar al-Assad has been dealt blow after blow as rebel forces take control of key cities. It's been just over a week of the rebel alliance's offensive to ultimately overthrow Assad's regime. Anti-government fighters make major territorial gains in Syria, now claiming to have reached the central city of Homs, a strategic location in Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's grip on power. In just over a week, the Islamist-led anti-government offensive has taken over major cities Aleppo, Hama, and in the east, U.S.-backed Syrian Kurdish fighters took Deir el-Zor. Rebel forces say they've also reached Homs and Daraa in the south, near Jordan. It's the biggest loss of key cities for Assad since the civil war began 13 years ago, after his regime's violent crackdown on democracy protests. The ongoing war has killed over 500,000 people and displaced over half the population. As rebels captured the cities, a glimmer of hope for residents.
I love you بعالم الثورة لأنه نحن بنعشق الثورة. إن شاء الله راح نرسم علم الثورة على حيط قصر الجمهورية في دمشق. وعايشين بالذل والخوف والاضطهاد شو بدي يعني ما بعرف شو بدي أحكي. لا مي لا كهرباء لا مازوت لا غاز.
These advancements break years of deadlock in Syria's ongoing war, and they're being closely watched by countries like the United States. Washington has about 900 troops stationed in Syria to support its Kurdish allies. Meanwhile, Iran, Iraq, and Syria have jointly condemned the opposition advances, calling them a serious danger. Russia, an important ally for Assad's regime, also launched airstrikes against rebel forces. But Moscow has been focusing on its own war in Ukraine, reducing its military support to Assad.
Today, Russia does not seem to be as interested in supporting Assad the same way they supported him 9 years ago. The image of Assad and his regime is different now, not only in the eyes of the opposition and those who are against him, even in the eyes of the loyalists and those who supported Assad during this war. They feel now he is weaker, he does not have a vision, and he probably won't be able to shape the outcome of this conflict.
As some celebrate the fresh gains made by the anti-government alliance, eyes are on the capital, Damascus. According to Reuters, rebel sources claim they've reached a deal with the Syrian army to allow its military officials safe passage there in what would be a significant threat to the Syrian president. Lian and Joyce Tseng for TaiwanPlus. Romania's top court has canceled the first-round election results for the presidential race after accusations of Russian meddling. The country's domestic intelligence agency says there are signs a state-sponsored actor worked to influence the race between pro-European centrist Elena Lasconi and far-right NATO critic Călin Georgescu. The agency points to the sudden influx of support for Georgescu as highly organized and part of a guerrilla campaign on social media. Moscow has denied any influence in the election. The court's decision has left voters concerned and confused.
Destul de incert, din nefericire. Este incert și nu știm în ce direcție merge, ceea ce ne sperie pe noi și pe familiile noastre.
Romania's current president, Klaus Iohannis, will remain in office until the new election is held in 2025. South Korean President Yoon has apologized for trying to impose martial law earlier this week. Yoon said he will accept legal responsibility for his actions, but stopped short of offering to step down. His apology comes hours before lawmakers are set to vote on his impeachment, which would require a 2/3 majority in favor. Yoon shocked the nation earlier this week when he gave the military sweeping powers to root out, quote, anti-state forces. He rescinded the declaration 6 hours later after a vote from parliament to oppose the decree. Thousands of people in South Korea have been marching in protest this week, calling for his removal. The UN has recognized Japan's traditional sake-making process as an intangible cultural heritage. Brewers in Japan hope the recognition will help an ancient industry that's seen better days. Bryn Thomas has the story.
Chief brewer Maisako Koichi uses a recipe he's followed throughout his career. A formula that some version of or another has been used for over a millennium.
でこのタンクの中にはお米と麹と水、あとイースト菌ですねが入って今ですね約20日間20日間発酵しててあと1週間ぐらいあと7日間ぐらいでお酒が出来上がります。
The concoction of water, rice, yeast starters, and koji, a culinary mold, will eventually turn into sake, an aromatic sweet and sour alcoholic drink beloved in Japan and known worldwide.
で発酵させてお米が届いてお酒になるまでに約2ヶ月かかります。で一番酒造りで重要なのが水です。この水はですねこの地下150メーターから汲み上げた天然水を使って醸造しています。
Traditional sake brewing follows a three-step preparation known as sandanji komi. This method allows multiple fermentation stages to occur at the same time in a single container, and it is so deeply rooted in Japanese culture that UNESCO has recognized it and the brewing process as a whole as intangible cultural heritage.
酒造り、自体が珍しいし、それが1000年以上も続いてきたと。でしかも日本の生活文化に密接に結びついているということでやっぱり日本としても今後もやっぱり大事にしていかないといけない宝物の一つだし。
Many in the sake industry hope the recognition breathes new life into an industry that's been hit hard by economic turmoil, climate change, and competition from Western spirits.
国内マーケットはですね、飲酒人口の減少だとか、他のお酒がたくさん競合するお酒がたくさんあるとかですね、経済状況の関係から、国内マーケットはあまり良くない状況です。
The climate too is working against the brewers. Not far from Ishikawa Brewery, unseasonably warm weather this year saw snow come later to nearby Mount Fuji than ever before.
例年に比べてかなり厳しい状況ですね。まだまだ暖かいですし、でもうそろそろ12月にもなるのにまだ暖かいという状況ですし、あと米の価格も高いというのが、で収穫量も少ないっていうので。 厳しい酒造りを強いられています。
Industry insiders point to the example of traditional Japanese cuisine, which the UN listed in 2013 and has proven wildly popular abroad. They hope similar recognition of sake results in a spike in exports.
ユネスコに登録されて和食は世界中で広まりました。そのことが日本酒でも起こるんじゃないかなと期待しています。なので弊社的にも輸出 が今増えてますし、それが加速されてもっと輸出が増えるんじゃないかなって期待してます。
A UNESCO committee session in Paraguay recognized the brewing technique on Wednesday. It's a move that could provide a new future for a beverage tied to Japan's past. Fu Huoheng and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Be sure to visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media. Finally, come with us to Lyon, France for the Festival of Lights. This year marks its 25th anniversary. I'm Joyce. Take care and see you next time.
For more stories from Peru and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.